According to the State of the Developer Nation, there are currently 24.3 million active software developers in the world. That's more than the entire population of Florida or Australia. Techies are integral to making the world function optimally, but unfortunately, quite often they spend their time not creating value, but trying to figure out how software that someone else created works. As you know from our other videos on technical documentation, writing docs is an extremely important part of creating software that users will love. But what if developers are the users? Let's talk about API documentation and why it matters. If engineers are helping the world connect, then APIs are the most useful tools in their toolbox. As you may know, application programming interfaces are pieces of code written and shared specifically to help software communicate. They allow one software to access information or functionality from another software. And they're everywhere, whether we're aware of them or not. So much so that we currently live in the API economy. API economy is the concept of using APIs to improve and optimize your operations. Companies build their own APIs to automate internal processes or use external, open APIs to gain access to a wide range of functionality in their own apps. Many companies wouldn't be successful today without using APIs to jumpstart their services. Distributing APIs has also become a viable business model. Salesforce surveyed 800 CIOs and IT decision makers to reveal that a third of related businesses' revenue is being generated by APIs. Brands like Salesforce, eBay, and Expedia have become truly API-led. By letting startups use their resources via APIs, large companies open up new relevance for themselves and contribute to innovation. What we have is a new and more efficient way to grow your business by using existing technology rather than creating everything from scratch. So, in a world where APIs are a product for consumption, you should put just as much effort towards creating and distributing them as you would with any software. And a big part of that effort must be dedicated to API documentation. Any API exists of two things: the actual code and the documentation for using it. What if you bought a Lego set to build your own Millennium Falcon and found that they forgot to put the manual in the box? Now all you have is a pile of Lego pieces that is worth nothing to you. APIs are the same. Engineers need documentation to know what an API can do and how to request it. And they need this information to be comprehensive and easy to understand. You see, developers interact with APIs every day, sometimes for over 10 hours a week. Searching for APIs, going on forums to ask about APIs, reading reviews of APIs, and rummaging in the documentation. So, if you want them to use your API, consider developer experience just as you would user experience. Let's start by understanding how API docs are usually created. Most APIs today are designed using an Open API specification. This is a standard format that allows devs to describe their APIs in a language understood by humans and computers, typically YAML. This is a sample of Open API definition. It's all pretty clear if you know what you're looking at. There's a version of the specification, then the name and description for an API, and where servers are located. Finally, here are the individual endpoints of an API. This one allows you to request a list of users. You can see response codes and their meanings: 200 for OK, 400 for an invalid user ID, 404 for not found, etc. In theory, OpenAPI's simple structure can help anyone make sense of an API without docs. But this would be no different from selling a Lego set in a big bucket with a black and white manual. Of course, you can still build a spaceship, but it won't be as enjoyable as having all the pieces pre-sorted with the instruction printed in full color. Luckily, OpenAPI also allows for automating doc creation. If your API is written in the OpenAPI standard, tools like Postman or Swagger will pull sample requests, code snippets, and examples from your collection and populate API docs with them. This is a big improvement from simply reading the specification. You can make no changes to these automated docs and distribute them among users as is. But for many API creators, this is just the beginning. To make truly great API docs that developers will love, you need to spend a bit more time on them. How should you write documentation to elevate the developer experience? One of the first recommendations we want to give is to address the entry level in your docs. Google creates some of the best documentation for its APIs, and it's no coincidence that they are used everywhere, all the time. One of its success factors is how beginner-friendly it is. Google doesn't treat its users like pros, and that's because they often are not. Among Google Maps, API users are just people who want to display a map on their website or calculate travel times for a complex multimodal family trip. Google understands its target audience and that it never consists of just one type of person. Generally, always remember that your API docs can be viewed by not only professionals, but also decision makers or tech journalists who just want to review and compare. To target them all, target the least experienced group. This includes writing in simple English, adding links to useful sources, and using visual aids. The next thing you should be doing in your docs is following the existing user journey. In product management, a user flow or journey helps the UX team map out the app's layout to follow the natural progression of a user's thoughts and intentions. And API users are users too. So how would they go about exploring your API? First, they'd like to know how this API can be helpful to them. That's why most docs start with a "What is" section. Who can use this API and how? What can it do? Then, if they decide they want to use it, how can they access it? What is the authentication process, and where can they get a key? After that, how do they actually start? Do they need to register somewhere else or tick some other boxes? Finally, you can provide information about specific API functions, examples, statuses, and errors, and dive into other details. The third piece of advice for you is to stick to the known layout. If you've seen a few API docs, you've seen them all. API information is typically organized in similar formats, so it's intuitive to use. Most incorporate a 2- or 3-column layout, with contents on the left, the main document body in the middle, and code examples to the right. Study the docs of a few popular APIs to pinpoint best practices, such as the contents always sticking to the side of the screen or code snippets in different languages. Also remember to keep your docs updated at all times. An API is only as good as its up-to-dateness. If you're using a software like DapperDocs or Redocly, your docs will be updated accordingly, but you need a maintenance strategy all the same. Start by assigning someone responsibility for updates. They will prepare docs to roll out along with updates, remove deprecated data, and analyze what endpoints might require more tutorials and improvement. Also, use the dev's natural inclination to share feedback and encourage them to rate the page and leave likes. Finally, employ a person that knows how to write technical content, a technical writer. Writing API docs means knowing how to translate jargon into words that people from different backgrounds can understand. This is typically the job of a technical writer. A tech writer is a person who's equally good at crafting sentences and understanding the underlying programming logic. Not only can they deliver sales copy to drive your API revenues, they will also add helpful descriptions, links, examples, and tutorials. Before we send you off to create great docs, let's look in detail at some examples. HubSpot APIs are used by those who want to build an app, those setting up a custom integration, and people looking to extend the functionality of their website. The last group is often marketers without any technical training, so HubSpot takes care of them in a few ways. The start guide is short and straightforward, and there's a section referencing community forums and a Slack group where users can go for help. HubSpot also has a free 1.5-hour course demonstrating what the APIs are used for and how to make them work. Note that HubSpot is currently transitioning towards a new generation of API, but they keep supporting an older version with corresponding docs. Another cool example is Stripe. Stripe is an API company, so their docs are the main way to attract, retain, and communicate with customers. An interesting section for review is the tour of the API, where the main concepts are described in plain English. Stripe docs follow a familiar 3-column layout, with code samples and other important info on the right. Traditionally, you can choose the library and copy the text in one click, but note a sleek switch between light and dark mode that many devs will surely appreciate. Every section ends with the "Was this helpful?" prompt for feedback. Salesforce, already mentioned a few times in the video, also deserves a quick overview. Before they even start any integration, users can review and compare different API types depending on the supported protocols and use cases. Each type will in turn lead them to separate documentation, which also starts with educational materials. After a detailed quick start, they have an abundance of examples with code samples to explore. Apart from these, you might want to pick out some ideas from docs by Twilio, Meta, and MailChimp, to name a few. Getting someone to use your product is what marketers and product managers of the world work hard to do. In a world where APIs are a product too, this effort should spread to API creation. Whether you want your internal API to be useful to your employees or capitalize on the service you publish, commit to it and treat the API with the respect it deserves. What aspects of tech documentation do you want us to explain next? Let us know and watch more videos in this series. We'll see you next time.